I'm glad you brought up student experience. I'd love to hear from the three of you. All of you are juggling things in the background, right? With the idea that the students don't have to experience some of the issues that your teams, end up managing. The manual processes, keeping things in sync, as you say, Andrew. How much of a challenge is, like, do you hear feedback from students about the data collection that they have to do, or is it like a silent voice that that there's issues because you see drops in responses, or do you have like almost like a voice of the student that brings up any issues about forms? Is that something that is a part of your departments?
Well, I hear about it when something doesn't work.
Is that it?
So, I mean, we're a really small school, relatively speaking, especially by American standards. So it's really easy to get a hold of a human, whether it's their admissions counselor, who will then put them in touch with me or tell me what the problem is, and I go into FormAssembly and fix it, or Salesforce or whatever. But if you're a larger school, obviously, and larger schools, getting a hold of a human can be a lot harder. You can never staff appropriately at a lot of schools, at least not as quick as you can get a hold of me anyway. So you may not. The one thing I will say with university applications is, I think a lot of people are more apt to persist for a certain period of time because you've only got so many options. I mean, we all have our competitors, but if you want to apply to a school, you're going to do what you can to apply to them. So I have experimented. Actually, we use FormAssembly for our applications, and I have experimented on one of them with at the end of it, it says it's like a scale from 1 to 5, and it just says, how was your experience filling this out? So I did that for a while, just as a test, because I do want to collect that sort of feedback. But at the same time, if you look at your response rates, and which you go into the analytics of that FormAssembly has, I mean, the forms are being filled out and seem to be getting filled out without too much trouble, and if something breaks, either FormAssembly sends me an email or the student does. And what's actually really great about that is sometimes I have it fixed before the student even sends an email. I email them before they do and say, hey, notice you had trouble with your application, the problem's fixed, and we've submitted your application for you.
Very nice.
So I will, one of the troubleshooting problems though is sometimes you really do just want to sit there and watch somebody do it because you don't know what they're doing to cause the problem. And that can be tricky with students because if you were a B2B, it'd be a little easier to do with a business client, I think. So can we just watch you? Once in a while, I'll get a student that I'll say, can we do a screen share? Would that be okay that I can watch you? Because I don't know how this is happening.
Yeah. Well, Barb, I know, you taught a larger school. What's your experience like there? Do you have teams that are hearing these issues? What does that look like?
Well, so we have an entire registrar's office that's, separate from my team, obviously. But I have two parts of my team. One is web support, but one, I have some UX UI people sitting on the engineering teams in their agile teams. And so we try to oversee the experience of all of our enterprise applications. However, our registrar office, they actually have an entire help desk dedicated to dealing with problems. And unfortunately, I have been trying to convince them that they need to collect feedback from more than just the calls that come into their help desk. I've been trying to convince them that, we should do something like the survey, that was just mentioned, and more usability testing on the processes. But they are just so laser focused on the calls that come into their help desk that that's pretty much the only feedback that that they get, or that they'll pay attention to. And so it's been a little frustrating because, you know, as a user experience person, I want feedback from a variety of places, because the people who call in with problems, you know, that's just one point of view. I'm sure there's a lot of students that get frustrated that don't necessarily call into the help desk. So I would love to do more user experience research on our processes and forms in that area, but they are not super open to that. So
I think a lot of IT desks have the same laser focus on tickets and cases because, you know, that's something that they can quantify,
Right.
you know, metrics that track. I see that outside of education as well. Kathy, you have experience with multiple schools implementing these processes. Have you seen anything address, you know, kind of like, as Andrew mentioned, fixing problems before they happen? Anything that like improves this consistently?
I have. Yeah, I've implemented Salesforce at 4 schools now. And there is proactive outreach to students. We don't want to bother them with administrivia, frankly. We want them to focus on their studies. However, when we are implementing something new, it is important to have that student voice, right? With focus groups, champions, those kinds of things, early adopters, just like you would with your project team, right? So your students should be part of that. But I'll say passively, and with things like a help desk, a natural place to start with Salesforce, even though so many schools start with recruitment, is email to case, that help desk functionality, phone calls, whatever. When you automatically create a case, you can categorize it, and without the very much work at all, the staff members are already doing the work to answer emails or answer phone calls. By documenting those touch points, those incoming touch points, we will find out what students think. They are going to reach out to us, mostly because we're either telling them something wrong, we buried the information, a process is broken, right? So we get student feedback all the time. We're just not analyzing it like we should. It is a super easy implementation to do email to case. If it takes you an hour the first time you do it, you're doing something wrong. If you've done it 15 million times like I have, it takes about 5 minutes. It is some work that every department's already doing. They answer emails already. It's a very simple thing to implement email to case, and I'm sure most schools have. Where FormAssembly comes in is with those contact us forms, and with all of our forms, frankly. All of our forms are administrivia. I hate to say it. Mostly students don't want to have to do administrivia. So if we use FormAssembly to collect form data, it can create a case. You can categorize those cases and get business intelligence that within the first 30 days that you're using case. So yeah, I've seen it. Absolutely, I have. You can tell case is my hot object, can't you?
Brian asks, he'd love to know more about how you're finding out an issue with an application before the student notices it. What tools are you using to discover that?
Oh, I spend my entire day just nosing around people's applications. No, I'm kidding. So in the back end, so I mentioned we use FormAssembly. In the back end of FormAssembly, you have connectors that are the intermediary between FormAssembly and Salesforce. When a student tries to submit an application, or however you've set up the form, whenever they try to send information through those connectors, if something doesn't work, it fails, or at least part of it might fail. It doesn't all fail, but some of it might fail. Then it sends an email to whoever you've specified. So in this case, it's me. And it says, this application had an error with this connector. And then you can go in and look up what the error was, or what and it's usually what we might call a validation error. Well, I guess they're all validation errors, but for instance, and some of these might frankly be partly my fault. The field the field in Salesforce, I'll make this up, might be limited to 50 characters. Or sometimes people in the phone field will put in 2 phone numbers. That's partly my fault. I could limit the number of characters. The reason I don't is because I don't want to mess up international numbers. So there's things like that. But yeah, you get an email, and you get to go, and you can go in, and sometimes it's an easy fix. And I've even done things like, I don't know, the birth date is really wrong for some reason. I'll put in a fake one, I'll submit it, and I'll say, just send me something with your birthday on it. And I go and update Salesforce, because I'm very sort of, because I have the bandwidth that I'm able to do these things. To Kathy's point, I don't want to be so dogmatic that it's like you must go in and do, it's like, if it's an easy fix, just make it easy, and put it in, tell the student, hey, we fixed the problem, but the birthday, clearly you weren't born in 2020 or something. So send me something with your birthday on it, and we'll update that. And, I will say this as a note of caution to anyone who does do this. 95% of the time, this all works out fine. Once in a while, you get a student who it weirds them out a bit that they haven't even submitted an application to, or they don't even know. So it kind of weirds them out sometimes that you can even see their application, which, logically speaking, you'd be like, well, of course they can. It's in a computer somewhere. But, you don't always think about that, which is fine. I don't want them to think about the technology. I just want it to work. But once in a while, you have to sort of be a bit gentle so they don't think you're watching. It's like, no, we're not watching you. But we know there's an error. And most of the time they're just happy it's done, that, because they're always worried something's happened to their data. So when I send them an email, sometimes I send them an email saying, hey, notice you have a problem, letting you know we're working on it. Your data is perfectly safe. We have it. And then fix the problem. And so yeah, it's a cool little feature. And depending on how you set your forms up, especially if you use the workflow feature, you can have this. You can have connectors at various steps. So not just at the end where it could fail on one or multiple, preventing the entire application. You could have it validate at different steps, so that the student doesn't get all the way to the end and have to go back to step 1 to fix something.